So, Ted, let's start off with the role of the NAIC in innovation. What has it been historically, and kind of where's the NAIC as an organization and as representative of all the states, where's that headed in innovation?
Yeah, that's a big question. We could spend an hour just talking about that. But I think in what we're seeing from the regulatory side is this exponential increase in the amount of innovation technology finding its way into the insurance space. And if you think about it, so when my dad was in the insurance business, he remembers punch cards, and then he remembers the first dummy terminal, and then finally they got PCs in the 80s or 90s. And all of that technology was really driven by companies looking for a way to modernize their systems, to keep up with technological advances that really help them. What we're seeing now is really a sea change in that we're seeing more interest from consumers driving a lot of these changes, and companies realizing that they need better relationships with their consumers or with their insureds. We're seeing consumers wanting more, quicker turnaround in insurance. The demand is changing, and so with that, we're seeing a lot of this innovation, and of course with all the technological advances, we're seeing a lot more of the innovation coming into the insurance sector. So the NAIC, has always been interested in what's going on with companies, but right now, the rapidity of change and the rate of change and the amount of things going on are really surpassing the knowledge base and the comfort level of many of the regulators. We really feel like we should be engaging more with this innovation and technology in the innovative space. So with the good work of Andy Beal and Mike Considine, who lead the NAIC, which ultimately is the regulatory support organization that supports the states, we are now engaging very regularly with companies and how they are bringing new technology into their systems, as well as the innovators who are out there coming up with new ideas, and really reminding folks that there is a regulatory piece to every move they make.
Sure.
Insurance laws and rules and regulations have been around for 150, 200 years, and they haven't kept up with that pace of change either. So I think looking forward, we're looking toward a time when insurance regulations maybe all of our existing models, or many of our existing models, are updated to reflect a new world, not a paper-intense world, but a more of an electronic or digital world, and re-looking at our regulations to make sure they're more principled in base rather than very static and focused on specific formats or specific ways of handling the business.
I think a lot of folks that are newer to the industry, which would include a lot of the insurtechs, they might have an idea or a perception that the regulatory community is less open to what they're doing, that they're super quick to know, and they just have this predisposition of what the result might be. And I happen to know that that's a completely erroneous perception. But can you speak to that just a little bit?
Yeah, and I'll tell you, before I took on this role 7 years ago, I was an insurance guy. I was a compliance, GR, operations kind of person who did a lot of different things, and that was my impression of the regulatory community. I think a lot of us have evolved to a place where we're embracing this, and we want to know. The regulators have a thirst for understanding what's going on out there, and many of my counterparts really would embrace any opportunity for an existing company employing new technology or a startup to come in and talk to them and explain what they're doing and eliminate or alleviate some of the curiosity or the doubts or the questions as to how these new technologies are working. Because, quite frankly, if a regulator is concerned about an issue or concerned about a new practice or a new technology, they're going to jump to conclusions. And you'd rather be out in front with them, trying to explain to them what you're doing. And and they are very much embracing those conversations and communications.
Right, right. The other piece of reality that I want to make sure we touch on is that, and you mentioned it just a while ago, is that the function of a regulator is to kind of ingest, what's happening in the marketplace and apply existing legal statute, the legal framework to that, right? So there's little subjectivity in the process, I think, right? So as you mentioned earlier, a lot of the statutory regimes that regulators are tasked with enforcing were created 40, 50, 60 years ago when some of the things we're facing now weren't even conceived of.
Right.
And they're being asked to kind of figure out how it works in that. And it's bad enough in the 2017 world, but when you look forward to what a 2020 world might look like, how does a regulator, how do they balance that? The balls of innovation and consumer wants and demands and expectations compared to a statutory regime that doesn't change as quickly.
Yeah, and that's the challenge for the regulatory side. But what we are endeavoring to do is either one of two things. Until we update or modernize some of our regulations and our statutes that deal with insurance occur, we are very open. Many of us as regulators are open to re-looking at the existing legal framework and the regulatory framework to not say no, but more to get to yes, and to embrace these new technologies, because ultimately so much of what is going on at a conference like this and so much of what is going on in the InsurTech community is meeting consumer needs and consumer demands, and it's providing better services and better products to them. And regulators shouldn't be getting in the way of that, and should be embracing it and trying to encourage that. Right. Ultimately, because our number one goal is to protect consumers, followed very closely, of course, by solvency. But protect consumers and make sure consumers have access to as many products that meet their needs.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the realities of innovation in this particular industry is, unlike technologies that impacted movies or music or books or whatever, insurance happens to be one of those things where you can't really make a mistake, because people's lives and their livelihood and their property are at stake. Right? So you have to be a little more diligent, if you would, or deliberate in how you evaluate and kind of promote innovation in this space. Would you agree?
Absolutely, absolutely. Again, that kind of comes back to consumer protection, and that's where having those good lines of communication with this InsurTech community makes so much sense, because we can get out in front of potential regulatory hurdles or areas where normal insurance discrimination, which is underwriting, right, takes place, to identify areas that might be considered, or in reality, unfair discrimination based on factors that we wouldn't normally allow. So again, that's why being up front, getting out in front with the regulator, working with them to let them understand that these new ways of gathering data, slicing data, using algorithms or different predictive modeling doesn't take into account factors that are ultimately proxies for truly illegal practices like racial or some sort of discrimination.
Right. So I know that NAIC in particular has initiated a few task force on big data and on just innovation generally, which truly is a representation of the emphasis that the regulatory community is putting on innovation. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, and I owe a lot to Nick Gerhardt. Nick was...
We want to be careful about giving Nick too much credit.
I know. He's a great guy and a dear friend, but I owe a lot to him as one who really saw this coming, and it was his impetus and his focus on this community and these rapidly changing this rapidly changing world of insurance that caused me to become very active and very engaged in these issues. So we're at a time when things are changing so fast that we need to focus on our blocking and tackling, but making sure that is out there taking care of consumers and providing those services that they're demanding.
So just for those in our audience that don't know, Nick Gerhardt was the former insurance commissioner at Iowa.
Yes.
He left to pursue other things not quite a year ago or so, but I guess one thing I'm not sure if it demands a response or not, but when you understand or recognize that insurance generally affects every piece, every element of commerce and of people's lives, not only in the United States but worldwide, you understand the gravity of the importance of the industry and how moving it forward is important, but when you do that, the job of the regulators and the impact that they're going to have and what an insurance industry looks like and how that can impact the world, it's a real thing.
Yeah, and it, as I like to say when I'm speaking to friends back home or companies back in my home state or I'm elsewhere, insurance is the backbone of taking risk. Yep. No risk. We saw this after 9/11. Right. Nothing could happen until carriers could figure out a way and business could figure out a way to get terrorism covered. Construction projects ground to a halt because there wasn't the insurance products backing that up and providing that security for the big commercial products, and then just generally, whether it's retirement security, life insurance, long-term care insurance, health insurance, or it's home and auto insurance, all of those types of protection provide that security and peace of mind that people need. So we obviously take our roles very seriously. Absolutely. And as we've seen the existing framework change, the business model of insurance change, it's why we felt it important to form the Innovation and Technology Task Force to take a look at that. A lot of companies have been using big data for a long time. We just want to make sure we understand how that big data is being collected, what's being collected, how it's sliced and diced, how it's going into algorithms.
Who owns it?
And who owns it, right. Right. If I have a bad driving record, I don't want that information shared with anybody. I want to keep it. If it's good information, I want to keep it too, so I can go to another company maybe and try to get a lower rate. Right. So there's lots of questions about ownership of individual data as well.
So the last point I want to make, again, is the respect that the regulatory community through the NAIC and their individual state organizations deserve as they go through that, because they get a little bit of a bad rap along the way, right? But we've talked just a little bit about how important it is. Mm-hmm. And so without the leadership of the regulatory community in this innovation process, a lot of unintended consequences could happen down the road.
Yeah, and I will tell you, as a former company person and then leading a state agency, it's really easy to say no, or to be said no to. Yeah, that's the easy answer. Yeah. And what I challenge my staff with, and what the NAIC helps us do, is how to get to yes. Yeah. Find a way to get to yes. It may not be a straight line, because there are hurdles to leap over. Ultimately, if what's going on is with a company or the new technologies to better provide products, services, and treatments and communication with consumers, that's what we should all be about. It's about getting to yes, making sure that consumers are protected along the way, but are getting the products, the prices, the service that they're looking for.
Right. Well, Ted, it's leadership from folks like you that make it all happen.
You're very kind.
Thanks for joining us.
You bet.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.